Welcome to the Teacher Performance Assessment Breakout Group session. My name is Kelly Daly, and I work for the North Coast School of Education as the EdTPA coordinator, the lead for our Be a Teacher intern program, and also as a curriculum specialist. Tonight, we will be talking about local and state resources for the teacher performance assessments, support strategies, and levels of mentor support in supporting candidates through this process. There are two different types of teacher performance assessments. One is the Cal TPA, which is a state assessment, and there are two instructional cycles in the Cal TPA. Instructional Cycle 1 is learning about students and planning instruction, and Instructional Cycle 2 is assessment-driven instruction. The Cal TPA has the candidates submit Instructional Cycle 1, get feedback about their submission, and then perform Instructional Cycle 2 and submit that cycle. The other assessment is the Ed TPA, and that has three tasks: the planning task, the instruction task, and the assessment task. Unlike the Cal TPA, in the Ed TPA, candidates complete the tasks in order and then is submitted in its entirety. Because the EdTPA is a national performance assessment, you would look at edtpa.com for resources, for information, and also you can find important information about how the submission is impacted by COVID-19 and the EdTPA participation. The same goes for Cal TPA. They have state resources. If you go to the Cal TPA website, you can just Google it, and they have information and resources there as well as how COVID-19 directly impacts candidates and in their Cal TPA participation. There are some local resources that candidates can access. Candidates can check with their education preparation program, teacher performance assessment coordinator, in order to get support, additional support that they might have. For the EdTPA, North Coast offers Canvas resources in terms of handbooks, templates, making good choices, and understanding rubric level progression. In addition, there is also room for some one-on-one support from North Coast School of Education in terms of the EdTPA. In addition, Yolo Solano County Center for Teaching Credentialing is offering a Cal TPA Academy, and here is the link. That academy goes from 4:30 to 6 p.m. for 6 sessions and is a cost of $250. If you want more information about the Cal TPA Academy that Yolo Solano is offering, feel free to contact them. Now let's talk about levels of mentor support. Using the After cycle, we can see how mentors and candidates work together to submit their teacher performance assessment. The first step is to assess by reviewing handbooks, assessment guides, looking exactly what the candidates need to do, what they need to know, and what they need to write about. The next part would be actually planning of the teacher performance assessment using content understanding and knowledge of students and how to support them. Next, the candidate actually teaches the lesson. By instructing and engaging students, a deeper level of thinking and subject-specific pedagogy is accomplished. Next, we reflect. Actually, the candidate reflects on the analysis of the student learning, provides feedback to the students, and actually has to show support on how the student is using this feedback to move forward in the learning. And finally, the application. The candidate would submit the EdTPA or the Cal TPA and continue with their professional growth and induction. This graphic here is actually from the EdTPA website, and I'm sure Cal TPA has a similar graphic, but what it does is it shows how the teacher candidate can complete the TPA in a virtual learning environment. So you'll see there are 3 sections. There's the green section on the left, yellow in the middle, and red on the right. And basically that is a stoplight. So green is go, yellow is slow, and red is stop. So in the green scenario, the candidate is able to deliver and collect task 2 recording evidence of synchronous instruction. So they have to meet all the technical requirements in the handbook and guidelines, and they're able to submit their recording to EdTPA with the minimum number of focus students. And if they can do this, then they're ready to go with submission of their teacher performance assessment. In the middle column where we see the yellow section, this means that the candidate can deliver synchronous instruction, but for whatever reason cannot capture the evidence as a video recording. In this case, the candidate would need to submit an alternative to video evidence application to EdTPA in order to submit their EdTPA. And this needs to be done prior to submission of the EdTPA. So if a candidate cannot videotape, capture their synchronous learning in a video recording, then this is where they would fall, because they could apply for an alternative to the video evidence, either with an audio recording or a written transcript, and still be able to submit their EdTPA. The final scenario is the red, and that's when the candidate can only deliver asynchronous instruction. And in this case, they're not meeting the technical requirements outlined in the handbook and would not be able to submit their EdTPA portfolio. Now let's look at some support strategies that mentors can use with their candidates. So prior to beginning the official teacher performance draft, mentors can talk about the tasks, they can talk about the scoring rubrics and the supporting documents, they can talk about what needs to be written, what needs to be collected as evidence, and also they can examine lessons or examples of teaching using the rubrics or supporting documents. Mentors can help their candidate find information about his or her students and what supports they would need. And specifically, this includes 504, IEP, and EL students. As a mentor, you can also provide feedback regarding planning and teaching. And you can use the rubrics either in the Cal TPA or EdTPA informative exercises, and or use the rubric language to evaluate and debrief any observations that you might have of your candidate. You can help your candidate get permission for the video, and you can share ideas on how best to record. So during the teacher performance assessment drafting process, and this also includes the planning session, mentors can suggest a timeline for completion of the teacher performance assessment. And I actually think this is a great idea if you go backwards from when the candidate wants to submit to the actual beginning of the planning and kind of map out a timeline, a time frame. That's super helpful for the candidates. Mentors can ask clarifying questions. So you might ask, have you compared your response to the prompts to be sure that every part of the prompt has been addressed? You might ask, have you provided sufficient context information so that scorers will understand how you have matched specific strategies to actions to your students? You might ask, what have you learned in your coursework or your readings about research or theory that makes you think that these strategies would be successful? So you can't ask specific questions, or you can't give them specific answers, but really what your support is there is to provide them where they might go to look for the answer. So probing questions are fine, but you can't have direct edits or specific answers to prompts. So you can't say, oh, you shouldn't have written that, you need to write this instead. And you can't actually directly edit what they wrote. But you can suggest using these clarifying and probing questions, point them in the right directions where they might find the answers to those questions. For EdTPA, that might be having them look and making good choices, or looking at the understanding rubric level progression handbook. Also, during the drafting process, mentors can provide references to relevant articles or sections of a text to address questions about effective teaching strategies. And of course, the mentor can flag instances where we see identifying information of students that still need to be removed from the TPA draft to ensure confidentiality. Now, what this means is if a student pops up with their name, then we need to remove or blur out the students' names, and we need to de-identify them as much as possible. There are instances where there are platforms where the student's name is linked to their grading platform, so it's almost next to impossible. And be assured that what EdTPA and Cal TPA, the goal is to de-identify as much as possible, but you certainly wouldn't fail the performance assessment if a name came up. This graphic is also from EdTPA, and this is the candidate supports, acceptable and unacceptable. Cal TPA has these exact same requirements, and we've talked a little bit about these acceptable supports, discussing the tasks and scoring rubrics, discussing supporting documents such as making good choices, using rubric language to evaluate or debrief an observation, asking probing questions, and obviously arranging technical assistance. The one we didn't talk about is on the left-hand side, the middle one, and that is discussing samples of previously completed Ed TPA portfolio materials with permission granted. So in an education preparation program, this might be available for the candidate in the sense that the preparation program has previously completed Ed TPAs. As a mentor, and maybe not having access to these previously completed Ed TPAs, this might not be something that is accessible to you as a mentor or your candidate. The bottom half is unacceptable supports, which we will talk about next. So unacceptable forms of support by anyone really is you can't edit a candidate's teacher performance assessment draft prior to submission. You literally cannot go in there and mark it up and say you would change this or this needs more evidence. That's a no-no. You can't offer critiques of the candidate's teacher performance assessment draft prior to submission that provides specific and alternate responses. You can't tell the candidate which says with here, but it should be which video clips or work samples to select for submission. And finally, you can't upload candidate responses, either recordings or written materials, on social media or to the scoring platform itself. The good news is there are only basically 4 unacceptable forms of support, and there's a bunch more acceptable forms of support, so that's good news. So taking a look ahead, there are some sneak peeks for some upcoming sessions for professional learning as mentors. You have the social emotional learning in the classroom, the North Coast ILP tutorial, there's Canvas for mentors, Canvas for candidates, and lots of other classes that are coming up in the future. If you go to the program calendars on the North Coast website, all of them are listed under specific counties where you can pre-register for these courses. Once again, thank you for attending this breakout session. I hope that today you were able to connect with some RECA TPA overviews in the general session, and more specifically have gotten some support strategies and levels of support that you can support your candidate in submitting the teacher performance assessment successfully. Thank you very much, and if you need to get a hold of me, again, my name is Kelly Daly, and I'm at kdaly@scoe.org. Thanks very much.